Is New World's economy damaged beyond repair? Now, whilst in this video I'm going to be talking about item dupes and exploits, I think the biggest effect on the economy has actually been the insane gold generation from certain towns. So let's talk about both these issues, starting with the dupes and exploits. Now, if you've been playing New World from the start, you'll be very much aware of the issues that we've had with exploits and duplications and all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously exploits like the insane damage from the hatchet at one point and the laggy wars, they may have had like a minor effect on the economy, but not really, so we're going to sort of skip over those. But we've definitely had gold dupes, and not just one gold dupe, we've had multiple. We even had Amazon giving some people in you hundreds of thousands of gold, and we've had a couple of item dupes as well. Now, most of these did occur within the first couple of months of the game's launch, and we've had a relatively big gap from those sort of near launch to the most recent one, which was a consumable item duplication bug. And the big question is, how much did this mess up the economy? And the truthful answer is, we don't know, and we'll probably never know. What we do know is that, like, from the most recent item duplication bug, that not every item that was duped has been removed, and we know from when there was gold dupes that not all of the gold got removed. It looked like basically those who laundered the gold, like selling stuff on the trading post or giving it to friends, etc., some of that gold managed to stay in the economy. So we know that there was at least some effect, we just don't know the significance of that effect. Now, whilst I personally think that some of the earlier gold dupes maybe helped some companies get into the bigger towns and stuff like that, I think ultimately the effects of these gold dupes and item dupes and stuff like that basically is dissipated over time. But the actual lasting effect was more the effect it had on the player base and the game as a whole. I do really believe that the general consensus of the game greatly suffered because of these bugs and exploits and that kind of thing. But I don't think that the gold dupes themselves were the reason for the massive like player exodus, but I do think they were a contributing factor. And then what about the most recent item duplication bug? Well, I think the answer is that it's more of an annoyance rather than complete economic disaster. Most of the items end up getting removed, but there's still some lingering in the market. Most of the players who did it get banned, and really I think the effect is going to dissipate over time like it did with the earlier exploits and stuff like that. Unfortunately for me, that raises two big questions. One is simply that the timing of these bugs getting found is always sort of unfortunate. In this case, it was introduced with the February update, which was a nice little like, hey, we're going to fix bugs. Hey, well, you introduced a new one basically, so you obviously somewhat failed. And ultimately it was discovered just as the March PTR was getting announced, which has all this like incredible new stuff in it. You know, we're getting a new expedition, we're getting a new weapon. It should have been a time for joy and happiness, but instead it was a time of like frustration because it got overshadowed by the dupes. And the second point is like, how does this actually occur? Because this dupe was really simple. It's been patched now, but I'm going to say how this was done just to illustrate the point. Please don't go out trying to find like exploits and stuff like that, and if you do find one, please like submit it through the proper channels. Don't like post it everywhere on Reddit or YouTube and stuff like that, please. But just to show how easy it was, basically on your item bar, if you had two consumables of different quantities, you moved the higher one into the lower one and it would dupe. I have no footage of that because obviously I didn't record that being a thing. And I mean, you have to question the coding that is behind that. Like, how did that get into the game? Weirdly, before they fixed it on the live version, I thought, oh, I'll go and try it on the PTR, and on the PTR it didn't work. So it seemed like it was something very specific that was introduced in the February update. And yeah, it's a little bit mind-boggling, it's a little bit confusing. They really need to get a grip of their code and make these exploits and bugs and duplications and all this kind of stuff cease to exist. But overall, I don't think that this will mess up the economy long term. I think most of these issues get sorted relatively quickly. Most of the items get removed, most of the gold gets removed, etc. Most people get banned. But yeah, for me, the issue is like coding and reputation. However, what I think is doing the most damage to the economy is the insane wealth generation from specific towns going to certain companies. Now, I have made a video on this before, but I'm going to repeat myself. Quite frankly, the obscene amount of gold that a company will get from owning a town like Everfall or Windswood is just far too much, and it's far too powerful in New World. If you were good enough, smart enough, lucky enough, or whatever to get one of those towns like Windswood and Everfall right from the start, and you manage to hold it for a decent amount of time, well, your company is absolutely going to rake it in. On Midgard, for example, I think like Everfall and Windswood possibly fell once or twice in its lifetime since the game was launched 5 months ago, and this is basically because these companies had a massive amount of gold. Their core players already had like best in slot items months ago, whilst I'm still personally trying to get 1 or 2 best in slot items. And you combine that with the fact that the defenders were winning the wars like 80% of the time, well, you were really never going to shift these people from Everfall or Windswood, and they were just going to continuously get more and more gold. Now, the good news is things are changing. On the PTR, there is a change to the war spawning for the defenders, where you can no longer spawn at points A, B, or C. You're going to spawn in the fort if you're the defender. That should mean that towns start changing hand a little bit more frequently, and that's a good thing. But I do think that the damage to the game is possibly been quite great, and I think it's being understated both by Amazon and by a lot of the players. I think Amazon don't really want to annoy the hardcore players, they want to give them a reason to fight for these main towns, but really it's putting off a lot of casual and solo players and that kind of thing. These companies have been getting like over 1 million gold per week for several weeks and months. They could very easily be over 10 million gold in the treasury. Well, I don't actually know if one company can store that much of gold. I don't know if there's a gold cap or anything like that, but they could have just like given it to their members and that kind of thing. But they could just have a lot of gold stored up, ready and waiting to go when they next need a new set of BIS. They're already in BIS, and now they've got money to burn if they need to. Now, if the progression system stops so we don't have any further advancement, people will catch up for sure. And with the Umbral system right now, it might effectively have stopped for a while. But at some point, you've got to think that this insane amount of gold is going to come back around and actually be useful again. Like if we get an expansion and the gear score goes up to 700, well, they're going to have a shed ton of gold to buy new BIS. Obviously, I don't really know what the game's going to do in the future. I don't know the kind of progression, but I've just got to presume that having an insane amount of gold is probably worth having. And if it is, I personally think that the damage to the player base is actually sort of insurmountable at this point. But you might be thinking, well, they're not going to win every future war, so this issue is going to be a lot less. And yeah, that's true to some extent. You're going to knock the teams off who hold like Everfall and Windsward, and then you're going to hold it, or somebody else is going to hold it, and then they're just going to lose it again in the same sort of time frame. It's not going to be as easy as it sounds. You're always going to be playing catch up. Basically, no company is going to get 5 months worth of Everfall or Windsward gold again. Now, if Amazon wanted to deal with this, I'm pretty sure that they could. They're just showing no signs of doing that. And I personally think that's because they don't want to annoy their current player base, which is effectively the hardcore players who are trying to do PvP. If you start taking off their gold from owning these big towns, people might say, well, I'm not that interested in the game, and they have a big concern because the players are already quite low. But personally, I think that this is an economic disaster that could affect the game for years to come. But no one will ever actually be able to really truly prove it, because like in a year's time, the people who aren't in these bigger companies are going to have no like visibility of it, and the people in the big companies who've got a shed ton of gold, well, they're not going to complain about it. And please don't post a comment telling me the best companies should be rewarded. I absolutely agree with you, the best companies should be rewarded. I just don't think that this reward is reasonable. I think it's too strong and too powerful, and that's just an opinion. You can disagree with that, but don't tell me that they should be rewarded. I agree with you. The reward to me though is just quite clearly too much. So to answer the question, is the economy damaged beyond repair? For my liking, yes, but Amazon could rectify it with some sweeping changes. They're just showing no like intention to do that, and until we get that, then I think the economy is going to be in a bit of a bad situation for a lot of players who aren't the hardcore players in these big companies, because Amazon haven't acted with speed or purpose to really resolve this issue. And as I said, I think it's simply to make sure that they don't annoy the hardcore players, and without realizing it, I think that's hurting the rest of the player base. But hell, that's just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, come and follow me on Twitch. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.